I've been building a lot of high-end gaming PCs on the channel recently, and while I'm really proud of how good a lot of them look, they all have one massive problem: their size. Lots of them are just enormous. So today, I want to see if we can build a really powerful gaming PC with some genuinely amazing hardware in a form factor that isn't going to completely overtake your desk setup, using AMD's brand new and hugely successful 9800 X3D, a top-of-the-range NVIDIA RTX 4090, Seagate's updated FireCuda 530R, and some Lian Li goodies that are going to give this build more RGB than you can shake a stick at. Let's do this. I'm going to start this build off by saying this is definitely not a system for everyone. I'm going all out on the RGB, including these Strimer wireless cables. I'm going stupidly high-end on a GPU that you might not want to buy right now, more on that later, but I'm hoping the build is going to look awesome, and we're going to have a good time putting it together. So shall we start with the CPU and the GPU combo, because of course this is what's going to define your performance in a huge range of titles. Now, the 9800 X3D needs little introduction. It's the successor to the hugely popular AMD 7800 X3D and continues AMD's winning streak of making the fastest gaming CPU on the market. It's got 8 cores and 16 threads, so it's not going to be a video editing or video rendering beast by any stretch of the imagination, but for playing Black Ops 6, Black Myth Wukong, Star Wars Outlaws, and of course esports titles like Apex, Fortnite, Valorant, this is the chip you want to buy. It's got absolutely awesome single thread performance, loads of L3 cache, and it's overclockable, which the previous X3D chips weren't. So it's great to see AMD making big strides here. The main improvement comes in the 1% low frame rates, which is where AMD has typically done worse than Intel, giving you more consistent FPS in gaming, which is awesome. For a top-end CPU, what are we going to go for GPU-wise? Well, we're going to go top-end, obviously. This is the TUF Gaming RTX 4090. Now, a few moments ago, I said this is a card you might not want to buy, and there's an important disclaimer attached to this very expensive GPU. We're expecting a replacement. That's the disclaimer. We're expecting NVIDIA to launch the 5090 at the press conference, which they have confirmed is happening at CES. They haven't confirmed it'll be the 5090 at the press conference, but we pretty much know that's what's going to happen. So while the 4090 is still an immensely powerful card, you might want to wait a few weeks and see how the market plays out. Now, some of you are going, James, I don't want to wait for this. I don't want to wait for that. I just want to buy it. And you could, fine, that's okay. And I get people don't want to wait forever. And when the 5090 comes out, if the 5090 comes out, it will go out of stock immediately. We all know that's what's going to happen. I just think it's important for you guys, if you aren't already, to be aware of the situation and of the market, so that you guys don't buy this and then get annoyed at me that you could have had something a little bit quicker for similar money in not the too distant future. Anyway, that's the CPU, and I'm digging myself a hole that I can't get out of. Let's talk about motherboard, storage, and RAM. Let's start with storage, shall we? And a big shout out to Seagate for sending over this, their FireCuda 530R. And by the way, they've actually sent me a second drive, so if you want to win it, check out the link down below and you can get all of the details. Now, this is basically an improved version of the FireCuda 530, which we've looked at on the channel in the past, and a big thanks to Seagate for sending it out, helping sponsor this build and make it possible. This is basically one of the fastest Gen 4 NVMEs on the market, full stop, sitting between the FireCuda 530 and FireCuda 540. You get read and write speeds of about 7.5 gigabytes per second, which is awesome. You get a really comprehensive warranty and even Seagate's data rescue or recovery services, so if the drive was to fail for whatever reason, again, highly unlikely, you can send it off to them and they'll try and get all of your personal information back, which is, well, pretty great, really. So big thanks to Seagate for sending this out and helping make today's build possible. Memory, I've just gone for a fairly low latency 32GB Expo kit from CORSAIR. This supports AMD and Intel, but it gives us the AMD profiles we want for our X3D CPU, and with a 6000 MHz clock speed, it's pretty quick. To be clear, the Expo thing is important to have, but most RAM kits have it nowadays. You don't necessarily have to get a kit that's explicitly memory for AMD. That, I think, is worth pointing out. And I'll leave links to this and everything else for latest pricing, info, and availability in the description below. Earlier on, I gave a bit of a disclaimer that this build wasn't going to be for everyone. It wasn't going to top the value for many charts. And this, the ASUS ROG Strix X870E-E gaming Wi-Fi, is another great example of that. Now, what I mean by that is that this board is fairly expensive. And while I think it looks absolutely amazing, there are undoubtedly cheaper boards you can buy if you're trying to maximize those value for money metrics. But in this build, I'm not. So this is what I picked instead. One thing this board does amazingly well is connectivity. You've got loads of fan headers at the top, your Q-code debug display, 4 RAM DIMM slots, AM5 socket, good CPU power delivery, really easy toolless NVMe installation right at the top of the board, plenty of M.2 slots below, a PCI slot that should auto auto-release, making taking in and out graphics cards nice and easy. The rear I/O is also really strong on this board. Everything from Wi-Fi 7 to high-speed USB-C ports, or USB 4 they are, and even things like 5 gig networking and optical audio out. It ticks a lot of boxes, and I think the ASUS ROG aesthetic is still the most premium for me. On some of those higher end boards, I like how this whole thing has been designed, and it wins top marks from me. Again, we've reviewed this on our website, which you can read in the cards section now. Cool, so that's the motherboard, and that's all of this stuff sorted. Couple more bits to talk about before we actually go ahead and put this build together. I mentioned earlier these Lian Li wireless Strimer cables, and I remember back in the day, it's gotta be 6 or 7 years ago, using these in builds. So if you want to see a bit of a throwback, we'll try and find some footage of that. And God, they've come on a long way. These are a lot better than what I used back then. So these are basically PSU cable extensions. This one is actually a Gen 5 extension, hence its nice blue end. That's so you can see if it's fully inserted or not. And the cable's built in, the RGB's built in. Before, these were a bit of a mess. Now these are super simple. Things like the fact they get the power from the GPU power cable, so there's no SATA power to plug in, and they use Lian Li's wireless RGB technology. So basically, this is like a transmitter receiver, which communicates with another transmitter receiver, and they ping the RGB settings between them, which is actually really clever. And I've got the same thing for the motherboard power cable. These are large, these are bulky, and they're expensive. They're not the thing you buy if you're trying to make your build super cheap, but we're not. I want this to look awesome, and that's why I have selected them. Talking of looking awesome, sticking with a bit of a Lian Li theme, this is the Hydroshift LCD 360R, and this is actually very cool. Now you'll see from the box, the tubes look particularly tidy. James, where have they gone? Well, they're actually very flexible and can sit behind the cooler itself to help minimize the tubing runs. Lian Li even have cases where you can run the tubes behind the motherboard tray so you don't see them, which is amazing. 3 fans come pre-included, and these are their nice RGB jobbies, and you can see there is a little bit of overlap on the end here. Again, that's controlling all the RGB and making the whole thing a bit more streamlined. On the theme of Lian Li, I might just briefly discuss the case in this build. This is Lian Li's Lancool 207. I wanted something in this build that wasn't too large. I've done builds in the O11 Vision, the O11D Evo, the Haven HS420. That is sick, by the way, but it's massive. This is a lot smaller, a lot more compact, and it's going to tick some nice boxes. It's also got the signature Lian Li build quality that you come to know and love. It's all fine, it's okay, it's because it's built well. That was a totally intentional build quality test, and it passed with flying colours. And it's not just a regular normal ATX case either, because the power supply is actually moved here to the front of the chassis, allowing you for direct air intake at the bottom. And in case you're wondering, yes, we're going to swap those basic fans out with something a little more snazzy later on. Room for 360mm rads at the top. All the case build quality feels really nice, super sturdy, super rigid, and as I said earlier, not too large. One more component to cover off, and I've saved the best till last, maybe? Probably not. The more boring component, I'm sorry, NZXT. This is the C1200 Gold. It's a 1200 watt power supply. It's very efficient. It's ATX3. Quite good value. So on that note, should we go ahead and build this thing? I think we will, and we'll start, as always, with the motherboard, CPU, RAM, and SSD. First job is the CPU. Gonna lift the arm on the socket up and then drop the chip into place before returning this down, followed closely by the memory in the 2nd and 4th DIMM slots on our ASUS board today, and the SSD, I'll be installing, as I said, the FireCuda 530R into the top right NVMe slot. Before going ahead and moving the motherboard into the case, I always like to check that the right mounting hardware is installed for the actual CPU cooler to go in. And I'm just looking at the manual right here, and there are a couple of brackets that the cooler will want me to pop on before adding the actual water block into place. It's going to make sense to do those now rather than later. By the looks of things, it's these 2 brackets in this bag here, these 2 plastic brackets, which we're going to need. The rest we should be absolutely fine with. So I'm going to add these onto the motherboard, screw them into place, and that should make the cooler install later, hopefully, a little bit easier. Once that is done, I'm then going to go ahead and grab the case. So what I'm going to do is swap these bottom fans out for Lian Li's reverse Unifan wireless intake fans. So that's 220s at the bottom. The 140s at the front I'm going to keep as they are. They're already pre-wired in. They already look okay. You can see through the front panel. They're going to be quite nice. I'm going to replace the rear fan with a LCD wireless Unifan. I'm going to display some key metrics on there and also change the radiator radiator fans, which do technically come nicely pre-installed for us, into those newer uni fans as well, just to get the whole thing matching. I'm only going to start off by replacing the bottom two. The rest can be done once the motherboard has been installed. Then I'm going to put the motherboard in, and Lian Li handily include this little toolbox of all the screws you need to do this. Slide it on in there. IO shield and all that kind of stuff is so easy now, it's pre-installed, and you can just pop all the screws in, 3 along the top, 3 along the middle, and 3 down towards the bottom. I'm then going to resume with the CPU cooler. In theory, this should be nice and simple. The bit that's going to make it a little more complicated for me is my intention to replace these Lian Li fans that come included with the marginally more fancy Unifans. You can see these have still got the RGB strips down either side, and this is a good opportunity as well to show you how the tubes work. So you can see they're just running this little mold, and then if the CPU sits directly below, you've got a much shorter tubing run. So I'm going to take all of these out, replace them with the other Lian Li Unifans first of all, then go ahead, secure this into the case. Now, to be totally honest with you, this whole cooler is just a bit of a beast really, and trying to get it in is going to be a bit of a challenge. So let's get it angled in. There we are. Then to screw the radiator in just to hold the whole thing together. After that, I'll sort out tidying up the CPU water block cables and actually popping that into place. The end result though should hopefully be worth all of the effort. The final fan related exercise is just to pop this last one with the screen at the rear. You can't do this because of the width of the case until the radiator's in, otherwise you won't get the rad in afterwards. 2 components left, the power supply and the graphics card. I'm going to pop the graphics card in first, and then we can see in one go how good those Strimer cables look. Now, I've gone pretty big on the GPU. This TUF card is not a small 4090, but because the radiator's at the top, we shouldn't have any problems. I think if you ended up with a front 280mm rad in this case, you might have some more issues. So let's just do a little test fit. Yeah, look at that. It fits perfectly. And the advantage of this Lian Li case with our 2 reverse Unifan SL wireless is we should get loads of great airflow into the bottom of the GPU, keeping GPU temperatures nice and low. I'm going to need to remove some PCI lanes, so it's the 3rd and the 4th, as the PCI slot is a little low down on this ASUS board. Slide it on in. It's a bit tight, I must say. What's that hitting? Ah, it's hitting the GPU support bracket. This thing over here. We might have to remove that because I don't think it's going to go any lower. That then should give us the clearance. I was getting worried then that maybe this wasn't going to fit after all. Yeah, that fits okay. You can see the GPU is a little lower down than perhaps what you may be used to. A bit gutted about the GPU support bracket. Obviously, you can hold it up while you screw it down, but it doesn't quite have the same impact. Grimmer wireless time, and I'm a bit worried because there's not a great deal of room to play with down here where the GPU is. The obvious solution, I suppose, would be to run this cable down into the basement of the case through this very handy little slot. The only problem is that it's just not really going to give us a great deal of actual cable, and this is upside down, so the actual connector is not going to go in that way anyway. Instead, it seems to want the cable to go in like that, which I suppose makes sense. The potential alternative is to run it in this lower grommet, but that's not going to happen with the GPU installed. So what I might do is take the card out, run the cable, then slot the cable back into place. I appreciate this is very much a first world problem and probably slightly self-inflicted, but let's see if we can get it working. That's a lot better. I think that looks a lot more sleek. Thankfully, the 24 pin should be a lot easier. This is just going to run either through here or through this slightly further back grommet. It might look a little bit better, give us a bit more cable on show, to our 24 pin motherboard cable. Yeah, I like that a lot. Look at that. That's super clean. And then all that's left afterwards is, of course, to get these extensions a bit of power. For this build, as I said earlier, I'll be using the C1200 Gold. So I'm going to go ahead, whack this in, do some cable management, see if I can get all the RGB configured so we can see how good this build looks when it's all powered up. This system certainly won't be to everyone's taste, but I actually kind of low-key love it. I think the RGB is just plainly unapologetically nuts, and the smaller form factor I think actually really works. I did of course as well test Seagate's FireCuda 530R that I included in this build, and I'm happy to report the speeds were well within the advertised window. But what about that all-important gaming performance metrics? Well, let's today try something a little different. Start off with the easiest to run games and finish with the hardest to run titles, frame rate from high to low. First up was Fortnite. As always, we tested this at 1080p competitive settings, everything tuned down to low except the render distance, which was of course set to far for maximum competitive advantage. And here the build achieved over 500 FPS. I think this might be a record for us. In fact, it is a record for us in Fortnite. 502 frames per second on average is frankly ridiculous. After that, I tested a little bit of Apex Legends, as you can see on the screen here, and the frame rate up at the top gives it away. 4K high settings delivers well over 200 frames per second on average, in fact closer to 300 FPS with 274. I mean, absolutely ridiculous to get these kind of competitive frame rates at 4K, but with so many new really high refresh rate monitors coming out, that extra frame rate is certainly very useful. Call of Duty's Black Ops 6 is next up. I've been playing loads of zombies recently, so I was particularly interested in how this combo would perform, mainly because I'm eyeing up a future 5090 and 9800X 3D for my personal rig, and in Black Ops 6 the build performed admirably with 133 FPS on average. That's of course at 4K high settings. Next up was Cyberpunk, delivering again really strong frame rates. Here we tested at 4K high settings with DLSS set to quality and frame generation enabled. That pulled in over 120 frames per second on average, while looking absolutely phenomenal in the process. The 4090 has so much power that things like ray tracing just become a nice setting to turn on rather than a big sacrifice on the frame rate front. Hogwarts Legacy is next up at 4K high settings. Here we've got no ray tracing, no DLSS to contend with, but at 4K high we still pulled in 114 frames per second on average, while Alan Wake 2 was slightly lower than this with 104 FPS. The settings used here, by the way, were 4K high settings, DLSS set to quality, frame gen set to on, and ray tracing tuned up to high. That brings me in through to the final game, the lowest performing title on this build, Black Myth Wukong. At 4K, very high settings with DLSS on quality, frame gen enabled, and ray tracing set to medium. Ooh, there's a lot of settings to talk about there. The frame rates were still strong, the lowest of any game as I say, but at 93 FPS, I don't think you can complain too much. What do you guys think of this config? I think this system is actually a nice change from some of the absolutely enormous gaming PCs we've built on the channel recently, and it shows that you can get a lot of power in a fairly compact form factor. If you enjoyed this one, make sure to get subscribed. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.